Good evening, brethren. Tonight we're going to continue with NejemYah, and we're going to go with chapter 10. As you guys remember, the previous chapter, which we read last week, was a beautiful Kehila or prayer done by NejemYah and the leaders for Yahweh to bring forgiveness and redemption. And like we saw, it had to do also with our time, as in it is a prayer that the people of Yahweh should be uh, doing. So the last verse of the previous chapter was 38, and it says, "And because of all this, we are making a trustworthy pledge and write it, and our rulers, our Levites, our priests set their seal on it." So right after that, we go to chapter 10, and it begins with verse 1, and it says, "And those who set their seal were Nehemiah, the governor, son of Hakaliah, and Sidkiah, Seraiah, Azariah, Yirmiah, Pashur, Amariah, Malkiah, Hatush, Shebaniah, Maluk, Harim, Meremot, Obadiah, Daniel, Gineton, Baruch, Meshulam, Abiyah, Miyamin. So Meshulam, Abiyah, Miyamin, Maaziah, Bilgai, and Shemaiah. These were the priests. So they all set their seal that we just read about in the previous chapter. And the Levites, both Yeshua, son of Atzaniah, Binui, of the sons of Henadad, Kadmiel, and their brothers, Shebaniah, Hodiah, Kelita, Pelaiah, Hanan, Micah, Rehob, Hashabiah, Zagur, Zerebiah, Shebaniah, Hodiah, Bani, and Beninu. The leaders of the people, Parosh, Pahad Moab, Elam, Zatu, Bani, Buni, Asgad, Bebai, Adonijah, Bigwai, Adin, Ater, Chizkiah, Azur, Hodiah, Hashum, Betzai, Harif, Anatod, Nebai, Macpiash, Meshulam, Hezir, Mejezabel, Sadok, Yadua, Pelatiah, Hanan, Ananiah, Hoshea, Hananiah, Hashub, Hashub, Halochesh, Pilcha, Shobek, Rehum, Hashabna, Maaseya, Ahiyah, Hanan, Anan, Maluk, Harim, Baana, and the rest of the people. It says, and the rest of the people, the priests, the Levites, the gatekeepers, the singers, the Nethinim, and all those who had separated themselves from the peoples of the lands unto the Torah of Elohim, their wives, their sons, and their daughters, all who had knowledge and understanding, were strengthening their brothers, their nobles, and were entering into a curse. This means pretty much that they were making a pact in which if they broke it, they would be cursed. So they were agreeing on a curse that would fall on them if they were to break the covenant. Of course, that means they were both or all looking to keep the covenant in that moment, of course. So we're strengthening their brothers, their nobles, and we're entering into a curse and into an oath to walk in the Torah of Elohim, which was given by Moshe, the servant of Elohim, and to guard and do all the commands of Yahweh, our sovereign, and his right rulings and his laws. And that we would not give our daughters as wives to the peoples of the land, nor take their daughters for our sons. As I have said in previous studies, this does not have to do with any type of racism, or as some people perhaps would interpret it because of their views of nowadays. But this has to do with the fact that if a person marries somebody who believes something different when it comes to the spirit, then that person, if there obviously that it there's a marriage, or even if there's not, if there is a child born to the couple, that child will receive an a belief from the father and a different belief from the mother, and that will bring a lot of confusion and certain issues for the child throughout perhaps his or her life, um, depending on how he or she deals with it after the person becomes independent. So this has to do with the fact that if we want to keep the faith, the true faith in the Most High, the true Creator, the Almighty, then we should have children with people who have the same belief, in order for those children to have that belief in the true doctrine. So that is one of the reasons why the scripture tells us or gives us laws regarding how we should deal with relationships, so that we make an oath with a person for life, in order for those children to be um, raised in the right way, in the way of Yahweh, following the Most High, and therefore being the best that they can be in life as people. And obviously, being able to receive eternal life and therefore be with their parents and family and loved ones forever in eternity, which is the greatest gift that the Almighty, of course, gives us, next to a bunch of other things that will come in that life that we will receive. So, and that we would not give our daughters as wives to the peoples of the land, because they would adopt idolatry, falsehood, paganism, all types of things, nor take their daughters for our sons. And that if the peoples of the land bring wares or any grain to sell on the Shabbat day, we would not buy it from them on the Shabbat or on a set apart day. And we would forego the seventh year and the interest of every hen. So, as we know, this just like, for instance, in English, there is the decade. So it deals with tens every 10 years. In the Hebrew culture, it is dealt with sevens. So just like there, we have the Shabbat, which is the seventh day of the week. We have the Shemitah, which is the seventh year, in which we are supposed to let the land rest. And after 7 sevens, that is 49 years, the next year after that is the Jubilee, which is the 50th, which is represented by Shavuot, the 50th day, from Bikurim, the day of first fruits, the feast in the month of Aviv, found in Leviticus 23. So from the day of first fruits, which is when Mashiach resurrected and went to the Father, there were 7 sevens, and then came this 50th, in which the Ruach HaKodesh came down on the people, and there was a type of harvest. So, and that if the peoples of the land bring wares or any grain to sell on the Shabbat day, we would not buy it from them on the Shabbat, because it is a day of rest from the world. The world is a place of buying and selling. So that's why that doesn't go with the Shabbat, because during Shabbat, everything will be free, because we will be in rest. Yahweh will provide everything. It will be clear how he provides everything, and we will be free from sin, which is what makes us have to go and work for food. Like we see in Genesis, when Adam and Eve sinned, is when we were told that man had to work in order to receive sustenance. So, and that if the peoples of the land bring wares or any grain to sell on the Shabbat day, we would not buy it from them on the Shabbat or on a set apart day, on a feast. And we would forego the 7th year and the interest of every hand. And we impose commands on ourselves to give from ourselves yearly 1/3 of a shekel for the service of the house of our Elohim. And we impose commands on ourselves to give from ourselves yearly 1/3. 1/3, just like, for instance, the relation between the few and the many is 1 and 3. Just like we see Daniel and his 3 friends. Daniel represents the few, the chosen few, the bride and the wedding of the Lamb, and the many are those who are invited to the wedding of the Lamb, represented by the 3 friends, Daniel's friends. So also 1/3 is connected to what we see in the trumpets. During the 6th trumpet, 1/3 of humanity will be killed by certain entities that will come out in a huge army that will come out during that plague, the 6th trumpet. And also it could be connected to the 3rd seal of Revelation when it speaks about the wheat and the barley. So wheat and barley, it makes the same relation, 1 to 3. So, and we impose commands on ourselves to give from ourselves yearly 1/3, just like 1/3 of the angels came down or rebelled with Lucifer, as in then sacrificing 1/3 because of that third of Malachim that rebelled. To give from ourselves yearly 1/3 of a shekel for the service of the house of our Elohim, for the showbread, and for the continual grain offering, and for the continual ascending offering of the Shabbats of the month, the new month. Here, as I always mention, we have Chodesh in Hebrew. Let me just add the parallel. This translation writes new moon, yet the scripture says Chodesh, which means month, but it has to do with the calendar that the Jewish people follow, which is one made by Hillel, based on the one they took from Babylon after the exile. Chadashim. So for the months, so it's in verse 34. Well, yeah, it's one verse different. But yeah, for the months and the feasts and the set apart days. Oh, well, in this case, also for sacrifices of sin, for atonement, for all Israel, and for the service in the house of Elohim, our mighty one. So, well, the point is months. It doesn't have the month that I have mentioned in Hebrew, that is the lunar month, which has a word in Hebrew for it. So I'll continue. And for the showbread and for the continual grain offering and for the continual ascending offering of the Shabbats of the months, for the feasts or appointed times, and for the set apart offerings and for the sin offerings, to make atonement for Israel and all the work of the house of our Elohim. And we cast lots among the priests and the Levites and the people for bringing the wood offering into the house of our Elohim, according to our fathers' houses at the appointed times year by year, to burn on the slaughter place of Yahweh our Elohim, as it is written in the Torah. So for bringing wood offering into the house of our Elohim, the wood obviously is taken from trees, and the trees represent the righteous. As we see in scriptures, the righteous are like where they grow like a cedar and give fruit like a palm tree. then we know that you shall know them by their fruits. So men in general are trees, but some don't give fruit, others give bad fruit, and others good fruit. So those who do not give good fruit will be cut and thrown in the fire. In this case, obviously, it has to do with how many sacrifice their lives, righteous sacrifice their lives for the service of Yahweh. And therefore, they take their tree, as in they take their cross, like Mashiach said, take your cross and follow me. So Mashiach was hanged from a tree, from a cross made from wood, to represent the tree of life. Through our faith in him, we eat and then we receive life. And we must take our tree, cross, and follow him. Therefore, that means we must sacrifice what we wear, what we wanted, if it didn't align with the will of the Most High. So, and we cast lots among the priests and the Levites and the people for bringing the wood offering into the house of our Elohim according to our fathers' houses, at the appointed times, year by year, to burn on the slaughter place of Yahweh our Elohim, as it is written in the Torah, and to bring the first fruits of our soil and the first fruits of all fruit of all trees, year by year, to the house of Yahweh. So just like all works are written down before the Most High, and day by day, and even feast by feast, they are reviewed in order to see what Yahweh will send to those who are on earth. In the same way, or in a similar way, during eternity, the nations will give tribute to the Most High through the many, and the many through the few. So the good works that people do will give them life, strength, knowledge, wisdom, etc. And they will bring that which they receive from the Spirit to the New Jerusalem, as we see here, and to bring the first fruits of our soil and the first fruits of all trees, as in the works of all men, year by year, to the house of Yahweh. Also to bring the firstborn of our sons and our livestock, as it is written in the Torah, and the firstlings of our herds and our flocks, to the house of our Elohim, to the priests attending in the house of our Elohim, and that we should bring the first fruits of our dough and our contributions and the fruit from all kinds of trees, of new wine and of oil, to the priests, to the storerooms of the house of our Elohim, and the tithes of our land to the Levites, for the Levites should receive the tithes in all our rural towns. So when it comes to, well, like I mentioned, Yahushua is the first fruit from the dead, for he was the one to receive resurrection unto eternity. So he resurrected and went to the Most High during first fruits. So we see here that it says, and that we should bring for the first fruits of our dough, which is pretty much like the mincha, the type of offering to the Most High that wasn't an animal that had to be sacrificed. So nothing had to die. It was wheat prepared for the bread, in this case, dough. And those represent the 144,000. So we also see that the 144,000 are first fruits in Revelation. So, and that we should bring the first fruits of our dough and our contributions, and the fruit from all the kinds of trees, of new wine and of oil. Also, the fact that it says all kinds of trees, like I was saying, all men are trees when it comes to the fact that some will be cut and thrown in the fire, some will be received in the kingdom because of their fruits. But according to the separation that we see in the book of Revelation, the sea represents the nations, the many represent the land, the earth, and the few are represented by the trees. So the trees, because they give fruit of lips, which is confessing the name, as we see in Hebrews 13:15, that we should give sacrifice of praise. That is the fruit of our lips that confesses his name, that confess his name. So that we should give sacrifice of praise. And then it explains that is the fruit of our lips that confess his name. So those who confess his name are given fruit, therefore they are trees, because they receive the seed of Yahweh, which is the word, the name Yahushua. And after that, everything that comes with it. The many are those who do not receive the name, that is the word, therefore the seed, so they cannot be trees to give fruit. Instead, they are just soil. They are the land waiting for the seed, but at least they are above the sea. Therefore, they are not under death, which is represented by salt water. So that's why the nations, pagans, those who worship death, false Elohim, etc., are the sea, because they are under salt water, which also represents Sheol, where the souls go after death. So, in the fruit from all the kinds of trees, just like there will be 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes, the 144,000, which are trees, like I just mentioned, as we see in Revelation 7 and other parts. Of new wine, which are the many, because the wine comes from the grapes, as we see during the harvest, the wheat, and then the grapes in the wine press. And therefore, we get wine. Those are the many who have to die, but then will receive joy when they receive a new life. And oil, that would be, it connects with the martyrs who gave their life for the spirit that was within them. Oil also connects with the priests, just in case. So, well, then we have here, to the priests, to the storerooms of the house of our Elohim, and the tithes of our land to the Levites, for the Levites should receive the tithes in all our rural towns. And the priest, son of Aharon, shall be with the Levites when the Levites receive the tithes. And the Levites bring up a tenth of the tithes to the house of our Elohim, to the rooms of the storehouse. So we saw this actually in the previous chapter in Numbers, of how the 10%, so the people of Israel would separate the 10% from what they would receive from their work, from the land, etc. And that 10%, they would give it to the Levites. A priest that was a descendant of Aharon would have to go with them, with the Levites, to receive the tithes from Israel, because from those tithes, from that 10%, they will have to take a 10% to give it to the priests. So just like Israel would give a 10% to the Levites from that would give a 10% to the priests, which is pretty much a 1% of that first 100%. So that is like the nations that I mentioned will bring tribute to the many, like the 10%, and then that will give the 1% of that 100. Therefore, from that 10%, they will get a 10% and give it to the few. And I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about the fruit, the honor, the tribute that will be brought to the New Jerusalem during the kingdom of Yahweh. So that's why there were three groups. And the priest, son of Aharon, shall be with the Levites when the Levites receive tithes, and the Levites bring up a tenth of the tithes to the house of our Elohim, to the rooms of the storehouse. For the children of Israel and the children of Levi bring the offering of the grain, of the new wine, and the oil. So that is like the few, the many, and those who gave their lives for the name or the testimony, as we see throughout scriptures, like those, for instance, who were in paradise, right below the altar during the fifth seal. So it says, to the storerooms where the vessels of the set apart place are, where the priests who attend and the gatekeepers and the singers are. And we should not neglect the house of our Elohim. And that's how that chapter ends.